When they stop seeing you. Have you ever felt invisible in a relationship that once made you feel safe? That quiet ache when someone pulls away not with words, but with absence. Maybe it's a friend who stops replying, a partner who no longer looks at you the same way, a parent, a colleague, someone who once made you feel seen until one day, they just didn't. You keep showing up, hoping they'll notice. You give more, text more, try harder, and somehow, it only makes things worse. It's not because you're not good enough. It's because the more available you become, the easier it is for others to forget what you bring into their lives. In psychology, there's something called habituation. The more we're exposed to something, the less we respond to it. It's not always malice. Sometimes it's just human nature. We stop noticing the warmth of sunlight until it's gone. We stop appreciating people who never stop showing up. But here's the part no one tells you: when you keep proving your worth to someone who no longer values it, you begin to forget your own. And the truth is, love or respect that has to be chased is never secure. What changes things isn't trying harder, it's stepping back. Not to punish, but to pause. To remind yourself and them that your presence is not a given, that you are not background noise. Because when you stop giving everything to be seen, you start being felt. And that's where we begin understanding why people stop valuing us, and how reclaiming your worth doesn't start with fighting for attention, but by returning home to yourself. 1. The quiet distance. There's a specific kind of hurt that doesn't come from being yelled at or criticized. It comes from being overlooked, from being slowly, silently pushed aside by someone who used to care. You feel it in the way they stop asking how your day was, in the way their replies get shorter, in how your presence feels more like background noise than something cherished. You tell yourself not to overthink it, but deep down, you know something has changed. And then you start to wonder, what did I do wrong? But what if the answer isn't about what you did wrong, but about how people respond to what's always there? Psychologists call it habituation. It's how our brains adapt to things we're constantly exposed to. The first time you sit in a new car, you notice everything: feel of the leather, the sound of the engine, the smell. But a month later, it's just your car. The same thing happens with people. When we're always available emotionally, physically, mentally, we stop being seen. Not because we're less worthy, but because, over time, people forget how much energy it takes to show up again and again. And so we give more. We text first. We forgive quickly. We rearrange our lives to make room for someone who doesn't even notice we're bending. But the more you give without pause, the more it tells the other person that they don't need to try, that you'll stay, no matter how little they offer in return. And that message isn't without words starts to shrink you. The solution isn't louder effort. It's quiet clarity. It's realizing that love, real love, includes effort on both sides. You deserve to be considered, not just tolerated. You deserve to be felt, not just seen. And sometimes, the most powerful way to remind someone of your value is to stop giving it to them so freely. To stop texting. To stop explaining. To stop trying to prove your worth. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. You don't have to disappear. You don't have to slam doors. But you can step back. You can choose to protect your energy and your heart. You can let space do the talking, because space makes people notice. And if they don't notice, that's a kind of answer too. A hard one, yes, but a clean one. The truth is, pulling away is not about being cold. It's about being clear. Clear with yourself. Clear with what you deserve. You don't need to earn love by giving more than you get. You need to remember that your presence has value, and that value doesn't grow by chasing attention. It grows when you quietly, firmly choose yourself. And the more you're always there, the more they start to expect it and stop appreciating it. 2. When giving becomes invisible. Have you ever found yourself doing everything for someone, only to feel like none of it really lands? You're always the one reaching out, checking in, picking up the pieces. You remember their deadlines. You remember their birthday. You remember how they like their coffee. And somehow, they forget you. Forget to ask how you are. Forget to meet you halfway. Forget that you've been the steady presence behind their comfort. It's one of the loneliest feelings to give your best and still feel invisible. And the worst part is, it's easy to believe the problem is you. That maybe you're not enough, or maybe you just need to try a little harder. But what if the real issue isn't about how much you're giving, but about how easy you've made it to be taken for granted? Psychology has a term for this: overexposure. When something or someone is always available, the brain stops registering its value the same way. It's not cruelty, it's conditioning. The same way you stop hearing the hum of your fridge, people start tuning out the things they don't have to work for. And when a relationship becomes one-sided, that imbalance quietly teaches the other person they don't need to do much to keep you around. So you do more. You chase, you apologize first, you over-explain. You think if you can just prove how much you care, maybe they'll start caring too. But in reality, the more you push, the more they pull away it, because they don't see your effort, but because they no longer have to. That's when the solution begins, not in more effort, but in redirection. In pulling some of that energy back to yourself, not out of resentment, but out of wisdom. If someone keeps taking without giving, it's not your job to convince them to notice you. It's your job to notice yourself again, to return to the version of you that doesn't rely on being needed to feel worthy. It's okay to stop texting first. It's okay to stop chasing conversations that go nowhere. It's okay to step back and let silence say what you no longer have the energy to. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to stop making it so easy to be overlooked. Because when people are used to receiving without effort, your absence will feel louder than your presence ever did. And in that space, two things can happen. They'll remember what you meant to them or they won't. But either way, you'll remember what you mean to yourself. And that shift, that's where respect begins again. So what do we do when that happens? We try harder, and that's where things start to unravel. 3. The strength in stepping back. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that love alone isn't enough to hold a relationship together. You can love deeply, show up consistently, give your time, your energy, your whole heart, and still find yourself feeling unimportant. You can give so much that you start to disappear inside it. You keep trying, keep hoping, keep believing that if you just do a little more, they'll finally see your worth. But the truth is, the more you try to prove your value to someone who's not trying to see it, the more you lose yourself in the process. When someone knows you'll always be true no matter how they show up or don't show you, it changes how they see you. Not necessarily because they're bad people, but because that's how human psychology works. It's called predictability bias. When we know something is guaranteed, we stop evaluating its meaning. Like always having electricity, you don't notice it until the lights go out. That's what happens when you make yourself emotionally available without pause. You stop being someone they feel lucky to have and become someone they assume will always be around. So you think, maybe if I'm more patient, maybe if I stay longer, maybe if I forgive again. But every time you stay in that pattern, you send a message: me time is yours, my energy is free, my love comes without terms. And that message slowly erodes not just how they treat you, but how you treat yourself. Here's where the shift happens. Not by shouting, not by begging, but by stepping back, not to punish, not to play games, but to protect your dignity. It's not silence out of anger, it's space out of self-awareness. You're not withdrawing love, you're restoring balance. Because when you step back, something powerful happens. You give the other person room to notice your absence. You let them feel the difference between your presence and your distance. And if they care, they'll come closer. If they don't, they were never really holding space for you to begin with. Taking a step back doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. Clear about your worth. Clear about your needs. Clear that being loved should never cost you your self-respect. You don't need to be more lovable. You don't need to fight for attention. You need to be still long enough to see who notices you're no longer chasing. Respect doesn't grow in desperation. It grows in boundaries. It grows in knowing that your love is valuable and you get to choose who receives it. But the truth is, the more you chase, the more you fade into the background. That's why stepping back matters. 4. Let absence speak. There's a moment quiet, settle when you realize you've been trying too hard. Not because you're needy, but because you care. You care so much that you've made yourself too available, too giving, too easy to reach. And now, the person you've shown up for day after day, moment after moment has stopped meeting you in the middle. Maybe they don't call back like they used to. Maybe their words feel colder. Or maybe they're just absent. Emotionally, physically, spiritually absent. So you try harder. You send the first text. You make the first move. You ask if everything's okay. But instead of getting closer, they pull further away. It hurts. It confuses you. And worst of all, it starts to make you question your worth. But maybe the problem isn't that you're not enough. Maybe the problem is that you've been too much for someone who never had to earn it. We're wired to crave connection. That's human. But there's a psychological law we don't talk about enough. The scarcity effect. It's the reason we value things that are rare, that feel earned, that require effort. It's not about games, it's about how our brains assign value. When something is constantly there, it blends into the background. It loses contrast. It stops feeling special. The same thing happens in relationships. When you give someone your time, attention, love without boundaries, they start to assume it. And the moment it becomes assumed, it becomes less respected. That's not always intentional. Sometimes people don't realize they're taking you for granted until you stop showing up like you used to. So what do? You stop talking? No. You stop chasing. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to fix a dynamic that was never balanced in the first place. You take a step back, not to punish them, but to remind yourself that your love is a choice, not an obligation. You let your absence say the things your presence kept covering up. Because absence, serial, calm, grounded absence forces people to feel the space you once filled. And space is powerful. It creates room for perspective. It creates room for clarity. And sometimes, it creates room for someone to realize what they've been missing. If they don't, that's your answer. If they do, then they'll meet you not out of guilt, not out of fear, but because they finally see your worth clearly. It's not about making someone love you more. It's about loving yourself enough to stop giving where you're not being received. It's not cold. It's not distant. It's self-respect. You don't have to shout. You don't have to beg. Just step back and let your absence speak for itself. And here's the psychology behind it. Your distance often says more than your presence ever could. 5. The value of what's rare. There's something that happens when you give all of yourself too easily. At first, it feels good: connection, closeness, care. You reply right away. You cancel plans to make time for them. You say yes even when you're tired. You do it because it feels right. Because you want to show love, be supportive, be there. But over time, something shifts. They stop noticing. They stop appreciating. They stop trying. And you're left wondering what changed. The truth is, nothing changed overnight. What changed was how accessible you became. Not just physically, but emotionally. Psychologically, we're wired to value what feels rare, what feels earned. It's called the scarcity principle. When something is less available, our brain assigns it higher value. That's why we pay more for limited edition sneakers, or why sold-out concerts feel more exciting. But this isn't about material things, it's about people, too. When you're always available, always giving, always saying yes, you become emotionally predictable. And predictability, over time, dulls perception. What once felt special now blends into the everyday. And it's not because you're any less worthy, it's because you've been too constant in a world that only slows down to notice what might disappear. So how do you change that? How do you remind someone of your value without begging for it? You stop making yourself so easy to reach, not out of spite, but out of self-awareness. Not to manipulate, but to realign. You start showing up for yourself first, taking back your time, your attention, your effort, and offering it where it's reciprocated, not just assumed. Think about it like this. If your love is a resource and you give it without pause, you teach others it's limitless. But when you step back, when you become more intentional about where your energy goes, you shift the balance. You create space. You create contrast. And that space, that quiet, firm distance, forces others to pay attention. It invites them to notice. It invites them to ask, where did you go? And that question, that's where respect starts. Because the people who genuinely value you will feel that absence. They'll reflect. They'll reach out, not because you demanded it, but because your quiet withdrawal reminded them that your presence was never guaranteed. And if they don't, that silence tells you everything you need to know. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be everywhere to matter. Sometimes, the most powerful message you can send is the one you send by doing less, by being still, by stepping back, by becoming just a little harder to reach. Not to be cold, but to be respected. Not to disappear, but to be seen. Because when you stop giving endlessly, something powerful happens. You start giving back to yourself. 6. You win when you walk back to yourself. There's a quiet kind of power in realizing you don't have to fight for someone to choose you. That the moment you stop performing for attention, stop chasing after half-effort responses, stop making excuses for someone else's emotional absence, you begin to see clearly, not just who they are, but who you've been turning into. You start to notice how much of your energy has been poured into proving you're worth staying for, worth loving, worth hearing. And somewhere in that realization comes a painful but liberating truth. The more you contort yourself to be accepted, the more invisible you become. We're taught, especially in Western culture, to earn everything. Earn love, earn respect, earn your place. But love isn't a job. Connection isn't a paycheck. And yet, when you find yourself stuck in a dynamic where you're doing all the emotional lifting, it starts to feel like work. Unpaid, unnoticed, unreciprocated work. You think, if I grow more, maybe they'll see me. If I fix myself, maybe they'll stay. But what if there's nothing to fix? What if the only mistake was offering everything to someone who never held it with care? In psychology, there's a simple concept: reinforcement. When someone's behavior is rewarded, even unconsciously, it's likely to repeat. If someone ignores your needs and you respond by trying harder, reaching out, giving more, you're unintentionally teaching them they can give less. You're reinforcing the very pattern that hurts you. That's why the shift has to come from you, not them, not someday. Now, you don't take your power back by demanding change. You take it back by making one. By investing your time, your care, your presence into people and places where it's mutual, where you're seen without having to beg for it, where love doesn't require a chase, but a meeting halfway. And here's the beautiful part: when you shift your energy inward, when you start pouring into your passions, your healing, your friendships, your joy, you become less focused on who's not showing up for you. You stop waiting for their text. You stop reading between the lines. You stop needing them to see your worth because you finally do. And if they come back, you'll have the clarity to decide if they still fit. You won't take them back out of emptiness, but from a place of choice. And if they don't come back, you've still won, because you stopped waiting to be chosen and chose yourself instead. Respect isn't given to those who beg for it. It's felt when you no longer need it from the wrong places. That's the win. That's the healing. That's your return to yourself. And once you reclaim your energy, the question is no longer whether they see your worth, but whether you still want to offer it. Choose yourself, quietly. At some point, we all learn the hard way that love isn't something you can force, and respect isn't something you can beg for. You give and give, hoping it'll be enough, hoping you'll be enough. But when someone starts expecting your effort without offering theirs, when they stop showing up and still assume you will, that's not love. That's imbalance. And staying silent to keep the peace only builds a war inside you. It's easy to think pulling back is cold. That saying less means you don't care. But sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to stop overextending, to stop pouring into a cup that doesn't pour back. Psychologically, we crave what we believe we can lose. It's not a game. It's human wiring. What's always available feels ordinary, even if it's extraordinary. So you don't need to get louder. You don't need to fight harder. You just need to step back with grace, with strength, with truth. Your truth. Let your absence make space. Let your silence speak the boundary your words couldn't. Let yourself be missed, not because you want revenge, but because you finally remember your own worth. And in that space, watch what happens. If they value you, they'll reach. If they don't, you'll finally have room to grow into the version of yourself that never needed chasing anyone to. Feel whole. You're not here to prove your value. You're here to protect it. Let that be the lesson. Let that be the peace.